So I guess let's start off. You came up with a list of words. Let's bring that list up. Words that. All right, so why don't we go with your idea about this, because this was something you brought to me, and yeah, we'll go from there. Hello?
Absolutely. Okay, so what I did is I put together this list. Actually, the bears put together the list. I threw it out there, and a bunch of bears kind of chimed in. And it's not exhaustive. There's a lot of other things in there. But one of the reoccurring themes I'm seeing in our contemporary society and what's going on with the political scene and what one side is kind of fighting on, and I guess both sides use it. Both sides kind of use that double speak type stuff. Wait, I'm actually having a problem with my feed right now. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Why is it? Am I in Hangouts with you right now?
Yes.
Am I just as a no name, or am I in as Ben Modest? Okay, that's weird. I'm not sure why it's not coming up like that.
Oh.
Okay, sorry about that. I got totally sidetracked. My brain just went off.
That's okay. Let's carry on.
So, so the rhetoric is being used, and it's Owen brought it up, and it was really pretty amazing that he brought it up the way he did. And he brought it up as in what the Zelenskyites were kind of bringing into the picture, and how they're using extortion in order to get what they want. So instead of saying, "Hey, if you don't pay us, we're going to beat you up," they're kind of saying, "Hey, if you don't give us power, we're going to say you're these things." And it's kind of this manipulation on a mass scale, because people who are generally good, or want to be good, and want to be caring, and do care about other people, don't want to offend anybody. And so they use that as a power tool in order to set up their extortion racket. So tools in order to do this, a big tool in order to do this is our use of language. So there is, and I just wrote down 3 different types of manipulative language that is being used right now, mostly by the left, but also by what people would consider hard right or authoritarian fractions. And I had the bears kind of jump in and add that too. So the three areas was social justice, doublespeak, and repurposed language, and euphemized language. And
Yes.
I think that in a big way, a lot of these words could be put into multiple categories. However, I just kind of like threw them in there the way that they're most commonly utilized.
Yeah.
And when I say social justice, I just kind of talking about the people who are more on the activist side, and vocabulary that they are using, and the new speak, the words they're recreating or creating in order to manipulate large groups or manipulate individuals into leaning left.
Yeah.
And so this is all things that had taken place with the authoritative Nazis and the dehumanization of the Jews. And this is all things that took place in socialist Russia under Stalin and communism. And they're really effective tactics. And we've seen them a lot of times throughout history. And it's something that Jordan Peterson brings up all the time. Is like, we've seen these tropes, we've seen these archetypes throughout history, but we're not good studiers of history. And in a post-fact world, I see it every single day with the kids and the access to information, but not the experiential knowledge to handle that and to apply what they're learning. And there's just so much information at their fingertips that they're not really getting the history and the knowledge that they need, because they say what a wise man is somebody who is either experienced or is able to glean experience from others. So they watch someone who's gone before them and go, okay, that's not what to do. Well, our contemporary society, the kids are not seeing that. They're not able to, they're not even, well, first of all, they're not even being taught it. But also they're not able to see it because they're distracted by instantaneous gratification, and they don't want to do the long form learning. And long form learning is things like reading and actually digging up the history. And long form learning is actually going through those experiences, whether that be your own personal experiences or it is the experiences of others through literally reading, or sitting down and hearing the stories that is supposed to be shared through the elders, whether that be parents or grandparents or other people in the community, but is now being brought to them by current media, which is like movies and television, that type of thing. And it's not vetted. So anyway, so they're not really getting the opportunity. And this is a Gen X and down thing. They're not really getting the opportunity to research where the word manipulation came from.
Yeah.
And those who are intentionally doing word manipulation are not going to share with them that, hey, yo, this is word manipulation. And then when it made me laugh, I know I'm kind of all over the place here, but it all makes sense. It's all coming to a point. But then when it made me laugh when Owen said, "Who hears dog whistles?" The dogs hear the dog whistles.
Yeah.
So those who keep on saying there's dog whistles are the same people who know there's quote unquote dog whistles, or they assume intent on dog whistles because that's what they use. And the dog whistles that the left is using currently aren't even really dog whistles anymore. They're basically blatant screams, human screams that can be heard by anybody, because they've become impatient. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing that the "I want it now" entitlement generation is fed up, and the whole "time is up" or "no more" or this ends now or whatever. All that stuff is good actually, because it brings it to the light. Whereas there has been an insidious blanket over time of slow manipulation to the general public by these Marxists and these postmodernists. So in some ways it's aggravating because it's so clear and obvious to those who dig a little deeper. But it also should be kind of a good thing because they've become impatient.
Yeah.
So those who are able to have a little bit profounder thought are able to kind of see, these people are they are now revealing what's under their sleeves. So that's kind of like the background to these terms, a little bit of the background to terms and what the intention is and what's kind of going on. So the first term that I put on there under social justice is literally social justice.
Oh yeah.
And I've been chatting for a little bit here. So my direction with that first word is what Ben Shapiro said. Do you have any comments on the word social justice in itself?
Well, it's a freaking joke, because it's not actually talking about actual justice. It's the jury of the mob. No, that's not the name of it. What the hell is that phrase? Court of public opinion.
Yes.
It's not actually justice. It's, you know, court of public opinion, which never ends well. It's rarely right, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you were talking about kind of the mob mentality where that's why, well, at least in the United States, we didn't fear, maybe that's not the right word, but we did not want a true democracy, or at least a majority rule, because of mob mentality, and because everybody puts their little check mark I doesn't mean it's good, right?
Yeah.
And the mob mentality is just another form of authoritarianism too, because when it comes down to it, we just had school elections at the high school I'm working at, and I asked the kids point blank, I said, what's more important, being on the right side of the policies that you want, or being seen as a gregarious and positive public figure? And the kids were honest, and the majority of the people who raised their hands not for what was actually being said, the context of what was being said, but for how it was being said and who was saying it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, and they're the same kids who will volunteer that information of, that the fact is that majority does not necessarily mean the best policy person. It just means the most likable. So they leaned on the side of likability.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense, because if they're thinking positively about it, especially if they don't necessarily have the time to look into it, you know, making it sound like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense, kind of a name like social justice, like, yeah, justice for sure, not realizing that it's, you know, a little bit on the tyrannical side of things.
Well, yeah, and then that's all connotation, right? So there's a bunch of words that have almost a natural connotation, because society just over time, when you say certain things, they tend to have the good outcomes, the good feelings about it. And so there's that natural connotation that takes place with words, and there's negative connotation that takes place with words. And then there's forced connotation that takes place with words, and there's forced and so when it becomes forced, then that becomes social engineering, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't use those naturally positive connotation words for social engineering as well. So justice throughout all of time in the United States has had a positive connotation. Now, what Ben Shapiro says about social justice is, yes, justice is awesome, and it does have a positive connotation because it's actually a good thing. Like, the definition in itself is awesome, but the moment you put a social in front of the word justice, you are distorting, you're modifying. I mean, literally, it's an adjective in front of the word. You're modifying the word justice. Well, if justice is perfect in itself, it has complete integrity. It's a whole. Justice is whole in itself. So if you put an adjective in front of justice, you're now changing it to less than justice. And if you think about how that actually plays out, social justice means less than justice, means some people get more justice than other people get. Which brings us back to Animal Farm and the whole term, some animals are more equal than other animals.
Yeah.
So
I haven't actually read that book. I should get an audio book.
Oh, dude, it's super simple, but it's really profound. You should definitely get that book.
I'll put it on the list. Yeah, I like the. You actually came up with a pretty good list here. Microaggressions is one that's always kind of bothered me, because it's like I can guilt you, or I can make you guilty of something without actually having to prove it. You know,
right.
that one just drives me absolutely up the wall. It's like, you don't fuck your hat.
Yeah. No, so yeah, microaggressions is such an amazingly manipulative word. Also, because, okay, so like what you just said, you're assuming intent. So,
Yeah.
so you do something, whatever you do, right? Um,
Yeah.
in order for me to take offense to it, I have to either assume intent or assume that you have been brainwashed to think less than others.
Yeah.
So the terms you're only using them because either you are actually throwing out a quote unquote dog whistle to somebody else, and
Yeah.
you think that they are less than you,
Yeah.
or you yourself are brainwashed and and uh, and are promoting that same. I'll use another trigger word, white privilege or whatever privilege you have. You are unbeknownst to yourself accessing that. So no matter how you look at it, it's totally insidious. It's either I'm making a huge assumption about what you feel based
Yeah.
on just a idiom, or
Yeah.
two, I'm making an assumption that you are doing something you don't intend to do, but you're still doing it. Therefore, you should be restricted on your ability to do it.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, which is crazy about microaggression, is it assumes aggression.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and you can assume all those things, and because it's aggressive, the only response to aggression is usually aggression, right?
Right.
So it therefore gives you the right to be aggressive to that person, who you don't have to prove that they actually did anything. They just microaggressed, and well, it's an open invitation for escalation.
Absolutely. Okay, so right here, yeah, and just to jump on top of that, it's an open invitation for actual aggression. It's an open invitation for violence. So
Yeah.
you're right. Like, then all of a sudden, because I did something that you have determined independent of me is bad, now it gives you the right to be violent against me.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Okay. So one of the questions here from Laris was, some animals are more equal than others. Can I get an in-depth explanation? So I haven't read the book. So basically, Animal Farm, I'm gonna cut out a lot of the really important parts about it. But basically, you have animals working on a farm who are the quote unquote have-nots, or the oppressed group. The owner of the farm, the human, according to the animals, is abusive to them, and maybe they're not great practices there, but they're doing all the work, and he's getting rich, or he's getting everything he needs, and the animals are on the sweat in the backs of the animals. So the animals, one day, because the guy forgets to feed him or something, the farmer forgets to feed him, they take over the entire ranch, the entire farm. And so they take over the farm, and the group that was in charge of taking over the farm were the animals, were the pigs, because the pigs were the smartest animal on the farm. So they organized the coup, they organized the new structure, and it was going to be under a communist structure. And they set up a bunch of rules. And one of the rules is all animals are equal to all other animals, basically, to paraphrase. And so they even wrote it on the barn, so that all animals who could read could see it there. But even if you couldn't read, you could see that was written there. Well, these animals could not learn. The only animals that could really learn to read and really learn the language was the pigs. So the pigs, over time, gained power. And the animals were told in the beginning that, hey, you guys have to work a little bit harder just in the beginning, because we're under new leadership and we're liberated now, so we have to work a little bit harder. And we obviously don't have the means to feed everybody, so you're going to be fed a little bit less, but it's all for a good cause, because it's to make sure that we all are equal, and we're now in a communist nation that everybody's going to be treated fairly. And so basically, over time, the pigs continue to gain power, and nothing changes. In fact, the farm ends up being worse off than better off. You know, socialism always leads in starvation and genocide, and that's pretty much happens. And so it really follows the Russian Revolution and how that all takes place. And by the end of the story, they've rewritten the new communist laws, where it says all animals are equal, comma, but some animals are more equal than others. Basically saying animals are not equal. There's actually a hierarchy that takes place. And it's too late, because now even generations have passed, and this is what they know. They just know the communist state. So they just know that they are working really hard and they are getting fed not as much.
That is a pretty freaky story, man.
Yeah, so that's kind of the breakdown. But and that's how it works, and that's how the socialism structure works. You have this structure where there's going to be a hierarchy, because not everybody has the same skill set, and how you organize that hierarchy matters. But the book, one of the things the book says, because Orwell was actually still a socialist. He had that same idyllic dream of a true socialism society would be a utopia, because everybody would be equal. And so his commentary on the book wasn't necessarily that socialism is bad or communism is evil. His commentary on the book was really that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so that's kind of the takeaway. But because in the capitalist governance of the farm, what it was prior to the animals taking over, it wasn't perfect, and we don't expect any society to be perfect, but it was actually better. And the reason that socialism is a huge utopia, I mean, there's tons of reasons why, but one of the main reasons why is because absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's always going to be a displacement between who's at the top of the pyramid and who's at the bottom. There's not something else I was going to say, but okay, we're totally off topic, and I'm getting slowly distracted. So that's Animal Farm for the chat.
Cool. Yeah, the one that I've always really loved is the tolerance, when they're like, you should be more tolerant. It's like, tolerant of what exactly? Mm-hmm. That is a very interesting double speak, because like you could be like, well, I tolerate, like I like individuality, right? So I don't tolerate people infringing upon that. And there's some cultures that do, and I wonder. I guess it begs the question: is a lack of tolerance for intolerance intolerant?
Right. So that's what did I put it in there as a redefinition?
Yeah.
Okay. So tolerance is a redefined. So what they've done in order to make it a manipulative thing, they've redefined tolerance from tolerance to acceptance and actually engaging in said belief and structure. So that's the first thing. That's the first problem there. The second problem is, and what you were saying regarding tolerance, we have a situation where being tolerant is impossible when you completely disagree with the end product. So like Owen talks about the ability for a 3 to 5-year-old to transition. Well, that I will never be tolerant of that, because I will never, and we will never believe that there's anything less than child abuse to do that. So I'm not going to be tolerant to that choice because you're abusing a child. People who are very strong pro-lifers, and believe wholeheartedly that baby is a baby and not just a quote unquote fetus or growth inside to a certain point, they're not going to be tolerant of you. If they wholeheartedly believe that is a child, they're not going to be. Why would you want them to be tolerant of killing a person?
Well,
right?
exactly.
Like it doesn't compute. You're not going to have tolerance in those areas. However, tolerance doesn't mean acceptance anyway. So then the second part of that is, what does tolerant actually mean? Tolerant means that I am not going to infringe upon your ability to do something. So let's talk about homosexual marriage.
Yeah.
So homosexual marriage, when that was a big ticket item and everybody was talking about that, people were saying over and over again, why don't you just you don't have to accept it, you have to tolerate it. You don't have to accept it, you can just tolerate it. You don't have to accept it and tolerate it. And I 100% agree with that sentiment personally. Yeah. So I do agree that the state should not discriminate against unions of any type, because that's not the role of the state. The state's role is not to discriminate against relationships that are outside, in my opinion, the purview of the state. What if a man and a man or a woman and a woman want to be together in civil union, they should have all the same rights that heterosexual couples should have in civil union, 100%. So I agree with that, actually, and I tolerate that.
Yeah.
Okay. I am not showing my tolerance by marrying a dude. Right?
Yeah.
That's not what tolerance means.
No.
So
it's a different thing.
Me showing tolerance is not accepting it, but it is not infringing upon it.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is vastly different.
But the double speak, the word has been repurposed to mean accept or even engage in. I mean, I had a really close buddy in college who was a gay dude, and he was like, wanted to take me on a date. Right? Yeah. He wanted to take me on a date. Dude, you're my homie. We can go hang out, but we're not going to engage in any homosexual activities because that's not my thing.
Oh,
and no, yeah. I mean, you know, every once in a while. No, I'm just kidding. And that's not my thing. I mean, it's just not who I am. It's just not who I am. So, he made one comment one time, but I think he was joking. He made one comment one time saying, "Well, you're just not being tolerant of my lifestyle." And I took offense to it, but I didn't really get after him because I think he really was joking.
Yeah.
But conversely, he was not. If he meant that seriously, he was not being tolerant of my sexuality.
Yeah.
So right away, it becomes the opposite is true. Like you said in the beginning, the opposite becomes true. It's the people who are preaching to be tolerant are the ones who are the most intolerant of other ideas, and we see that more than anywhere else in the world. We see that with how people are treating. And I know you're not a Christian, but there's a lot of leftist activists, intolerant activists, who are doing that against Christianity.
Oh yeah,
big time. I mean, big time. I mean, it even happened in my own family, where my father side of the family is very Catholic. They're very strong Catholics.
Yeah.
And his wife, so my stepmom, her son is now married to the woman that he was living with, but prior to that, they were living together prior to marriage, and they they don't believe that that is the right way to go about a courtship, right? So that's a no in their book.
Okay.
They would invite the couple to their house. They would go out to eat with them. They would spend time with them doing any activity, but they refused to go, even though they were invited to her son's house to have dinner, because they didn't agree with their arrangement.
Yeah.
They were 100% tolerant. They didn't show less love. They didn't show anything. They were 100% tolerant to his behavior, but they did not accept his behavior as, for them, the right thing to do. Well, his big brother lost his mind and was angry at them and fought with them and told them they're stupid or they're being bigots or what. He just couldn't handle the fact that they did not choose that for themselves.
Yeah.
He was showing that extreme intolerance towards somebody else. He could disagree with them, that's fine, but for him to lash out and to be aggressively attacking them that's basically the definition of intolerance.
Yeah, man. That was one of the things that just drives me freaking nuts. What else is on the list? What's one you want to touch on?
Oh yeah, there's so many good ones on there. Some people put so many good ones on there. So euphemized language, I thought was really awesome. Euphemized language like dreamers, euphemized language like POC. So I've talked with a couple of people about POC, people of color, and I correlate it back to the term retard. Okay. And I'm not saying people of color. Obviously, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the term for people who had cognitive disabilities was kind of mushed into a lot of other terms. Okay. So like there were the berserkers who were these overgrown morons. I mean, their IQ was in the term idiot and moron. We know that they have meant, and they were actually scientific terminology, like psychologists or whatever it was, were saying, okay, if you are a moron, your IQ is between this and this. If you're an idiot, your IQ is between this and this. So, so the class of people that didn't have the same intelligence as the general population were called something, right? They were called morons, let's say. So people who had Down syndrome or who had mental retardation, whatever it was, were called morons. Well, that changed and became euphemized. As a matter of fact, in order to make the term sound better and to classify those groups, right? Because now we're trying to classify those groups to separate them from, well, there's this type of idiot and there's that type of idiot and there's this type of, whatever it is. So you're breaking it down to classification.
Yeah.
So they changed the term to mentally retarded or mental retardation, and in order to be very clear about what the classification of this this type of defect was, birth defect, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So people over time naturally, because this is what the language does, is you see somebody who is different and they exhibit certain traits in that difference. And then you look at your buddy, or maybe it's not your friend, but it's somebody else who you just want to pick on because you're maybe a bully or whatever it is. And you attribute those negative characteristics to that other person. So over time, people started attributing not people who had Down syndrome, calling them retard. I mean, I'm sure they did call them retard too. I mean, there's some asshole people out there. Yeah. But they were using the terminology, whatever that they were called scientifically, in order to hurt them. But also, and I would say more so, they were attacking friends or even enemies in the schoolyard. I mean, most language starts, in those teen years. I mean, that's where language really gets created. Just look at rap artists. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, Shakespeare, same thing. It's in the arts where you have these new languages and everything else. So you see your buddy do something dumb, and you go, "You're such a retard." Yeah. They're not retarded. They're actually not retarded. You're calling them something to make it seem like, oh, you did something stupid. Yeah. You see a you see a kid on the schoolyard who's different or awkward or weird, and you got to call him a name. So maybe you call him a weirdo. Maybe to your buddies to look cool, and this is our bully tactics. This really happens, right? You call him something. there's always going to be something to call somebody. There's always going to be some term to call somebody something. They just happen to use the term retard because it's stuck. For whatever reason, it's stuck. So all over the nation, in movies and everywhere else, because movies are a reflection of the culture most of the time, they were calling these non-Down syndrome people retards.
Yeah.
So it's stuck. So then once that becomes the popular terminology to call someone stupid, they go, uh-oh, so we can't actually use the term mentally retarded to note people who have Down syndrome. So now we have a different term for it. So they euphemize language. All right, Down syndrome. Well, I don't know about you, but I've heard the term, hey, what do you have, Downs or something? What do you have, Downs or something? So yeah. It's just they just pick up the word. So over a period of time, that term's gonna change. That's the same thing that happened with POC. POC were Negroes because they were literally talking about either Black people from Nigeria or Niger, because that's a literal country. So yeah. Hey, you're from Niger, or maybe you're Brazilian and you have dark pigmentation. And what is the term in Spanish for Black? Negro. Negro. Okay, so you have those terms. And so those terms are, okay, so what is this person? Is this person a Negro? Okay, you can call him a Negro, but now that's too close to I'm not going to use the term, even though I should, but in my station, I shouldn't use it. So I'm just going to say N-word, even though we all know I'm saying the same word. But anyway, so the N-word is being used. So it's too close, so we can't call him a Negro, so we're going to have to call him something else. Colored people, okay, well now colored people is out. It was good for a little while, but now it's out. So now it's African American. Yeah, but there's a lot of Black people who aren't from Africa. All right, well then maybe it's Black people. Okay, now it's a never-ending cycle.
That's where that changing landscape language comes from, like the ever-changing landscape.
The ever-changing right. And so there's the natural ever-changing landscape where we go, okay, well instead of calling the shitter, we're going to call it the John. Well, instead of calling it the John, we're going to call it the bathroom, or instead of calling it the bathroom, we're going to call it the restroom.
I still call it the John, which that poor guy. To all the Johns out there, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for all the Johns out there are that's terrible. But this is just the nature of language, and by intentionally euphemizing language, so forcing the change in language, what you end up doing is now you're creating a power, right? So if the language changes naturally, then everybody's on board, and it's just socially acceptable to change the language in order to to interact with people in the best way possible, because that's what all language is, right? And this is why I tell my class all the time, all language is communication. It's just communication. So are we learning language arts in order to be better receivers of the language, or are we learning language arts to be better senders of the information? So that's all it is. That's all English is. That's all Spanish is. That's all German is. That's all Chinese is. That's all Russian is. All these languages, all they are is humans' ability to communicate the best way possible. So if we naturally allow the language to adapt, what we're doing is we're saying, I am going to communicate the best way possible to the community around me. If we force change or try to force change in the language, what we're saying is, I'm going to tell you what you can and can't say. And with that, I'm saying, I'm going to take the power of how you are allowed to think.
Yeah.
So that's why euphemized language is so dangerous, but also so weirdly, what's the best way to say this? Weirdly about power and dehumanizing the person. Like you said, microaggression. So what's the intention of labeling or tagging words or the way we say things, idioms, as microaggressions? Well, what's the intention there? What does that do? It does the same thing that euphemized words do. Whoever is the speaker it strips them of their intention. It strips them of their actual beliefs, and it labels them something that we'll just call bad, right? So now you cause a microaggression. You are now put in bad boy category. You used a word that we have euphemized to mean to do something else. So now we can put you in the bad, because if you are using microaggressions, then it has to be intentional. If you are using language that we have so hard to say this, euphemized, then now you are also in that bad person category. Whether or not you are actually bad is completely irrelevant. I get to now label you bad because you because of the terminology that I made up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so insidious. And now the structure is organized so that not only do I get to put you in this bucket of deplorables or basket of deplorables, now I win any argument, because how could you possibly have anything good to say if your new intention that I placed upon you is evil?
Yeah. Well, you can't, right? Like it shuts down any possibility of debate, and it also like vilifies that person who is receiving that label to the point where, well, if you're just a racist, then you don't need to be, like, your viewpoint isn't valid, right? So it basically strips them of their right to have a voice.
Yep.
Which is kind of a pain in the ass.
No, I mean it's so bad. But then I wonder, why are people not getting this? Why are people not understanding? Hold on a second. All right, now I'm back. I'm better than ever. Okay, so the question becomes, well, why are people not understanding this? Why are people not kind of in tune with this kind of insidious wordplay? And the reason is, well, I think I break it down into three reasons, and I don't know, maybe you can chime in about what you think too, but I break it into three reasons. One reason is they are actually evil people, like they're Saul Alinsky-ites, and they literally are trying to extort the public for power. So there's always that they really could be evil people. I don't think that's a majority even close.
No, I would say that's a significant minority.
Yeah, I would agree. Significant minority. So if it's not that, then what else could it be? Well, could it possibly be that that they are ignorant, like just really, really ignorant? And I couple that with, well, I won't couple it. I'll just say ignorant. Maybe they're just ignorant. Maybe they just don't.
Maybe they just don't know.
They just don't know. They only see. They're not into politics. They only see CNN every once in a while. They only see MSNBC every once in a while. The trusted news source. Why would they lie? That doesn't make any sense to them, because they don't want to be in that world. They're just ignorant to it. They're not interested in doing. They are absorbed in the microcosm that is their life. Why would I escape it if I'm getting my needs taken care of and I'm happy, right? So there's that way. Ignorance.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we got the evil, we got the ignorant.
And then the third one, I would say, is they, and this is hard to say because it's a microaggression, I'm assuming. But they don't have the cognitive ability. And that's a reality. I work with a classroom full of kids, right? Multiple classrooms full of kids. And there is a percentage of students in there, and I just have to teach them very differently, because I can't go fast, obviously, because even only 10% of the students pick up fast. I can't go medium speed because, yeah, I'm gonna catch about 60% of the kids on medium speed, maybe even more. But then there's 10% of the kids I have to go really, really slow, and I can't expect them to retain the information from one day to the next necessarily. So we reinforce that material over and over again, because those are the kids who are not going to retain the information really well. And I have these conversations with people often where I really do think they're trying to understand, but they don't have the cognitive ability to get there. So they are going to go to the path of least resistance, and that's what humans do when they're just naturally going about. And that's evidenced by, have you ever walked out of a building and all the doors were closed, but someone was in front of you? More likely than not, especially if you're not really thinking about it, you're going to exit the same exact door as they do, even if it's a mall with 20 doors. Because
path of least resistance, chances are the door is open already.
Right. No, totally. And that's what we just do naturally. It's not that, I mean, if we cognitive think it through, we might not do that. Or if we're in a rush, we might go around them because we want to get out fast. But if we're just kind of just ho-humming it and they open the door, we're going to go through that same door. Right? It's just how it is. So if I'm in a society that is all like, dude, this Trump guy's an asshole, we hate him, blah, 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 he's going to ruin our country. If I'm ho-humming it, I'm going to go in that direction. And if I'm ho-humming it and I have a hard time with complexities or nuance, then I mean, there you go. But that's kind of how I break it down in those three areas.
Well, not only that, but those people who may not be intellectually capable of it,
right,
they kind of need it, right? So like, what's the best way of saying this? For them, their chance of survival. So people are always going to do the thing that allows them to survive the most, right? And for them, it actually makes more sense to have those, to vote in things like that, and to go with path. It's like the zebras, where if you dot them, they get eaten, kind of thing.
Yes.
For them, actually standing out and not having the collectivist kind of deal, really, really poorly for them. So.
Right, and the scary thing to me, and that's okay, because it's okay to have any type of person or any type of ability. The scary thing to me is that we are now structuring our society in such a way that not only might they be awkwardly ostracized by their peer groups, but they also now have to worry about legal or job ramifications. So even people who are not very intelligent are generally intelligent enough to go, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Because if my ideas even skew a little bit,
then I'm not prepared for the backlash that's going to be coming my way.
Right. I am not prepared. And Owen says this all the time. He's very intelligent, right? He's very, very intelligent. And he's very, very capable. So those two coupled together, he's going to be just fine. So he can take on, with great responsibility, or great power becomes great responsibility. And so he's kind of shouldering the burden, even though he doesn't necessarily want to in a lot of ways, but he's shouldering the burden for a lot of people. And even if his mindset is he has to shoulder the burden for his two sons, and that's it,
Yeah.
because he is so intelligent and capable, he ends up shouldering the burden for so many of us. Like myself, I get often scared that somebody will find me on, Twitter, or find out who I am on these live streams. They understand hear my voice, or I give an anecdote and they go, oh, I know that anecdote, I know that story, I know that person, and I'm going to have repercussions for it. I will lose my job immediately.
Yeah.
And it will be very, very hard to get another job in California if I get labeled something.
Any
what used to be extreme, and now it's just even Republican. Like, I had one of my colleagues even just say the word Republican, and people were like, eh. It's like, what is happening? Like, like,
people having different viewpoints.
The dehumanization of other is insane in our nation right now. And I'm a little bit older than you, Kyle. And growing up, when we were studying Nazi Germany and World War II, everybody was like, that could never happen again. How in the world did it happen in the first place? They were just like, that's ridiculous. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. And then the teachers, good teachers back then, who actually taught history, the actual history, right? They were like, they would tell us, well, this is how it happened. It happened because of dehumanization. They started labeling people who were different. They started scapegoat. I mean, the term scapegoat was used all the time in class. Scapegoat. They're blaming people for this thing. They're labeling people, dehumanization for this thing. They're calling all Jews vermin. The Jews were the people in power. They were the power position. They had the privilege. Jews, privilege. Jews, privilege. Jews, vermin. Vermin, Jews, privilege. And they said over and over and over and over again. And it didn't matter that it wasn't witnessable. It wasn't matter that it wasn't true. It was said over and over and over and over again.
That's because that's one of the signs of right before genocide against those people who are being accused of having privilege, man. Like, I'm no history buff by any stretch of the imagination, but I've taken a look at the few big players, and they all did the same thing. Every single one.
Yes.
Start talking about privilege, the white privilege, side gendered privilege, like fucking heteronormative, like where things that just are about them is an offense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When they talk about heteronormative, it's not as a like, okay, well, this is typically how people fall into place. There's outliers, but this is what. No, it's more like it's something to be disgusted with because it's not the victim of some aggression, right?
So yeah, no, I'm 100%. So that's what it is. So they, that's the dehumanizing terms, the other, the us versus them mentality, the scapegoating. But you're right. So the euphemism. So it's a connotation, right? So heteronormative has a forced negative connotation. So somewhere in, I want to say late 80s, 90s, the term weird was adopted by the quote unquote freaks and geeks, right? And the freaks and geeks, in my generation, they weren't the cool kids, but they were the cool kids in a lot of ways too. And there was tons of movies and pop culture about how the geek ended up getting the girl, or the smart person ended up being like a Bill Gates. And so there was this really cool, you got picked on when you were in school, Ben Shapiro, but now you're this awesome guy because that's how it always happened. Naturally. It always happened. The smart kid who stayed in school and focused on school ended up being a really kind person and cared about the women in his life, wasn't a womanizer, and ended up getting to a great job. And his maturity was quote unquote delayed, but when he came into his own, he was a solid human being. And the bullying that he incurred growing up, or she incurred growing up, made them better to other people because they understand the problems there. And the jocks I mean, in the 60s, the jocks were the meatheads, right? Yeah. There, at no point where that in my understanding, were the jocks the really cool guys in media or in even life. They were the bald old fat person who abused their wives or got divorced and couldn't keep a job and everything else. So this is not a new. Anyway, I'm totally sidetracked because my brain is.
No, just run with it.
So you are right when you say they're, to paraphrase, they're weaponizing and they're creating negative connotations to things that, even if they didn't have positive connotations prior, they weren't in this bucket of just awfulness.
Yeah.
Being normal was a good thing, but it was never a great thing.
Yeah.
Being great was great. Being a weirdo or a freaks and geeks or the rebel, that was the great thing. So being normal was never, in my entire life, and I can't go too far backwards in that, but I have seen some earlier movies and I have interacted with older people. So I've had those conversations where there was never a point in the history of the United States that I'm aware of that normal was better than different. And because different always had the ability to be great, normal never ever did.
Well, it's like we mock the normies.
Yeah. And we always will, and our society has always mocked the normies. So now to make the normal the enemy is crazy. But how did we get there? We got there because there was this big battle between what is natural and what is not natural.
Yeah.
And if you I think you would remember this debate where it was well, homosexuality isn't natural. So that term now is a double-edged sword because there's actual homosexuality in nature.
Yeah.
But it's not the norm of nature. It's the abnormal. And whether or not we put a value, good or bad, on the normalness is a different argument, but it's all been conflated.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I was going to say something that but this conversation, isn't it so funny how nuanced even the slightest things are?
Yeah.
And in order to manipulate, they dumb it so far down so that you have to pick a side instead of having a conversation. Yeah, go ahead.
That's what makes it so insidious, because what they do is they willfully take out the nuance in any of it, right? So where it's heteronormative is bad because they're the oppressors. It's like, well, not really. I mean, we do have a familiarity bias that's just built into us, but it's not necessarily like, I don't know of many people who are like, fuck them, right? For being gay. I just don't know anyone who hates on. I
mean, I know it's out there. I feel confident it's out there.
Yeah,
I know people in the homosexual community who like will have someone yell "fag" or whatever it is at them, and it happens for a moment, and it's really uncomfortable, and it's stupid, and the person saying it is an idiot. But you're right. On the day to day, I know zero people who are just like doing that. Yeah.
I can't even think I can maybe list off like 4 or 5 people that I know who like directly don't like gay guys, but that's specifically due to like.
Do they not like gay guys in general, or they don't like specific gay people that have affected their life?
In general, it seems like like usually. I imagine there's probably something that drove that.
Yeah, it's just weird. I mean, I parallel that to people who just hate Christianity. not hate Christians necessarily, but just hate Christianity. I'm like, why? And they can't give me any really valid reasons. They just keep on going back to some offense they happened to them by a Christian. So a human being hurt them, and so now they hate the whole entire religion.
Yeah. See, that's the thing that I like. As I've said before, I'm like atheist or agnostic or however
Right.
you word that.
Mm-hmm.
I see the value in like where they're coming from. I really do. Like, respect the hell out of a lot of the values out of that religion. I just can't see. I just can't see the reason for the middleman. That's about my only explanation for it. Which, yeah.
So this is what I was going to say. So we talk about how the normalness of something it shouldn't be weighed as bad or good. So heteronormativity is not it has become or has been placed on this altar of oppressor. So right, if you had like two lists, there's oppressor and oppressed. So normal, just the idea of normalcy is now put in this. Oh well, that's normal, so it's bad, and they're oppressors, and it's heteronormative, and it's the hierarchy, and the hierarchy are setting this up for their benefit. Blah blah blah. So we have that structure going on. So we also, with that, we have this idea of privilege. So instead of privilege being like, okay, everybody in the quote unquote privileged class are people that are just in the normal, or what we see as contemporary normal. And because they're the contemporary normal, then we're going to pile on top of that means that they had to structure it by oppressing what is not in the quote unquote normal. Therefore, they are bad because now they are oppressors. So we're putting them back in that category. So the term privilege, if we prescribe to that and just say, okay, let's go with that. There are privileges that the quote unquote most normal group is in. All right, so the most normal group has privileges because society has been shaped around that most normal group. Whatever, maybe it's the most normal group because it has been the majority in this country, at least, for over 200 years, right? So okay, so let's give it to them. Let's give it to these people who believe that and say, yes, there is some type of privilege, but we know that privilege is different in every situation.
Yeah.
And for me to believe that I have privilege over anybody else I'm with, I have to believe that the person that the third party that we are both addressing either is for me over that other group, or they are bigots. So I have to now take the idea of me having privilege and project it onto any human being or organization I interact with.
Yeah.
So in order for me to say I accept my privilege, I'm really saying I believe that the majority of society is going to treat me better than other people. With that way of thinking, I'm doing two really bad things. One is I'm making really huge assumptions about the badness of other people because I'm basically calling them bigots. And two, I'm boosting myself higher than whatever other group I'm with.
Yeah.
That is horrific. That is horrific to think about. So then, okay, let's just take that and put it to the side. Now, assuming that I believe that way, to what degree do I have more privilege than any other person next to me? So the degree at which I have more privilege than the person I have next to me can only be determined by how much greater I am to the person next to me in the eyes of other people. That's so many assumptions.
And like, but the problem with that too is like, how could you possibly measure such a thing?
Right? You can't. You cannot. You cannot measure that. You
Like,
cannot measure that. And on top of that, not only can you not measure it, because you cannot measure it, you cannot even give the adequate variable outcome of reparations.
Right? Well, that's the other thing. Is like, how can I owe something for something that I never even took part in?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
But I mean, but it's worse than that, right? I mean, think about what we're saying right now. So I'm standing here, right? And so I am, let's say, I'm not saying this is true. Let's just pretend that I'm a white male from the UK, and my family are 5th generation Americans. So we're all, we're all Scandinavian. All of us, the whole family's Scandinavian. So we're all Scandinavian white people with blonde hair and blue eyes, and we lived in the United States for 5 generations, but we never were slave owners or anything like that. But our family did live here, so therefore we did glean the benefits of our white, quote unquote, white nation, right?
Yeah.
And I'm standing next to somebody who has the exact same story as me. However, his 5 generations go back. He goes back 5 generations to the United States, but he is African American descent, and his family was actually came in. I'm going to make this up. They came in the North, and they were George Washington's slaves. So like they had it all. They are in the house. They're lighter skinned, and they just had it all, right? Whatever it is. We walk into a bar owned by a black man, and majority of the people in the bar are either black or Hispanic, and we walk in that bar together.
Okay.
Who has the privilege in that situation? Probably, more likely not. Who has the actual privilege in that situation?
More than likely, the black guy.
More than likely, the black guy. Okay. Now let's say we walk into the same bar, but this time it's owned by a Hispanic person or a Latino person. Let's say Latino, not Hispanic. Let's say Latino because they're from Mexico. A Latino person, and there's a bunch of Latinos in the bar. Who might have, and we're in a really white area. So let's say we're like, I don't know, in a white part of Tennessee, but just happens to have a Mexican bar. And we go in there, who might have a slight privilege in there?
Well, the white guy, because it's in a white area.
Because it's a white area, so the white guy might have a slight privilege.
Yeah. So
to what degree do I have privilege? Does that white guy, I'm saying to me, the Scandinavian guy, have privilege over the black guy? To what degree? Can we put a monetary amount on it? Can we put a rudeness or a politeness on it? Can we, maybe the servers will attend me better than they'll attend him? I mean, to what degree should I pay reparations or acknowledge my privilege in that scenario? Is it going to be a big degree? Is it going to be a very, very small degree? To what degree am I experiencing privilege in that scenario?
Yeah, and
it's unquantifiable, but the point is maybe, just maybe a tiny bit, because
it's just unmeasurable. That's the issue. It's like, because there's no way, for one, how could you possibly put a monetary value on it? For two, like, it's not something that you can accurately measure by anything other than experiences,
right?
And depth of character. It's just,
right, and those scenarios are I'll agree that those scenarios are vast and complicated and nuanced and coupled over and over and over and over again. So that being said, I might be with I might be now. Let's say I am a black guy, and my girlfriend's a black woman, and I have. Do I have a slight privilege over her because I'm male? Maybe I do. So in certain situations, maybe I do. In many situations, maybe she has way more privilege than I do.
Like on the sinking Titanic.
Like on the sinking Titanic. But so my point in bringing that up is over the course of our lives, maybe my overall privilege outweighs her overall privilege by, I'm totally making up arbitrary numbers, but like 90. I have 90% privilege, and she has 85% privilege.
Yeah.
So that 5% privilege over the course of that whole entire time. Okay, so let's say we account for that in some way. But that 5% privilege is not, and maybe that seems like a big percentage over the course of a lifetime, but I mean, all these numbers are arbitrary. But my point in saying that is we cannot account for that. So the only way we can account for this idea of privilege and inequality is by making it just blanket fair. We cannot quantify how much more privilege over the course of my lifetime that I received than my black counterpart. We cannot quantify that. But what we can do is try the best to mitigate privilege by in every scenario making it as equal as possible through education, not by trying to tip the scales in one direction or another.
Yeah, well, that's why I don't like affirmative action, because it's inherently racist. I just want the best person. I don't care if I have to go in for heart surgery. I don't care if my freaking. I know there's some people that care if the doctor's black or Spanish or whatever, but I don't fucking care. Right? I want the guy.
And people wouldn't care. It's like the Nimmer joke.
Yeah.
People wouldn't care.
Nobody gives a shit except for diehard racists. And as we stated before, they are the significant minority.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. People don't care, and they'll care even less if we do the Morgan Freeman and stop talking about it like this.
Yeah.
I mean, Owen Benjamin, why is that joke not appropriate? Because you can't talk about a black person's lips. What's the difference between a black person's lips and a white person's lips? Oh, well, throughout history, they were mocked for the size of their lips. Okay, that was shitty as fuck. We shouldn't do that. And that's real. But by pointing it out, you're creating a difference in children that they would not have seen otherwise.
Right?
It would not be a thing. Why do we celebrate Black History Month? Well, the real reason we celebrate Black History Month is because there was a point where a lot of schools were not talking about the contributions that black people made in the United States. Well, that was wrong. So how do we fix that? We talk about the contributions that black people made in the United States. Yeah. Morgan Freeman, don't give me a Black History Month. It's American history. It's just all that it is. So instead of pointing out that there's these problems and there's differences and we need to hate each other or like each other because of differences, what we do is we bring it to the evenest scale as possible. What actually happened to the best of our historical evidence? Yeah. What contributions were made? Celebrate those contributions. Celebrate the contributions by the white person. Celebrate the contributions of the black person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and all the great leaders throughout history had controversies. All of them. Every single one of them. And if we judge humanity by our big mistakes, we have no history. But if we judge humanity by all our positives, then we have also no history. So we have hero worship. So instead of doing that, we just tell the truth. Shit. Yeah.
I really miss the days when like I remember growing up as a kid and being in school and hearing about these are the good things that past Canadian prime ministers did. These were the really shitty things. There's such thing as residential schools up here. right? That was a really shitty thing about our fucking history. But it's not the defining thing, and I don't think it should be a defining thing.
No.
Right? Like, mistakes were made. We could definitely do better. I would like to see, right? And like, I like Owen's joke where he's talking about the one of the other reasons why I don't like the whole reparations thing is because like Owen makes that joke about where it's like, you know, everybody's saying, oh, well, slavery or residential schools is the reason why they were, why they're still struggling now. And he's like, yeah, but the Jews got freaking murked and they were bounced back within a decade.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
well, and the only argument, the only I'm going to say quasi, but the only quasi-solid argument for why it's different for African Americans is because they say that no other race or culture, at least in the United States, had the same type of slavery and institutionalized emotional and physical abuse as African Americans, which is true. However, that's not what is keeping the majority of African Americans down at this point. There has to be new leadership, and there has to be a revivification of the culture, the highlights of the culture, because like even Owen has talked about it that too. What was it in the 60s or 70s? The Black unemployment rate was better than it was lower than it was in like the 80s and or the 90s or the 2000s or so. There's some statistic where it just got worse.
Yeah.
For Black people. Now, check this out. Speaking of Black people, check this out. Holy crap. About 50% of all, maybe even over, all Black people are aborted before they're even born. 1. 2, you have a huge population of African American males in prison.
Yeah.
3, you have a crazy number of homicides, of all the statistical homicides in the United States, over 50% of them are done, or murders, I should say. Over 50% of all murders are done by Black people, and they are killing, of all murders of people who are killed by other people, 48% are black. So that's basically saying that 50% of the Black population doesn't even make it to the world, and 50% of those who do end up getting killed.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Wow,
that is I mean, come on, man! Like, and that's a culture that's allowing for. And I know there's a lot of reasons why that happens, but those statistics are scary. And those, oh God, it's the scariest, craziest thing. So there's definitely a problem. That's
not good.
I mean,
that numbers just blows my mind.
It blows my mind, dude. Blows my mind. I mean, to think about the United States alone, you could have, what is that, one? So if no Black babies were aborted, that would double the population, so that it would go from 13 to 26% of the population would be Black. Okay. Then if all the people, and if the Black people who have been murdered dropped to like relatively reasonable numbers, maybe 10%, then that's, what is that, 1% 1% of the 26, so it'd be about 25% of the population would be African American. There'd be 1/4 of the population of the United States would be African American or Black if those two statistics went away. Just that right there. That's huge
number, man. That's a lot of people.
Huge. That's so many people. I mean, let's do make up numbers. We can get pretty close. Let's say, what is it? Let's say, so 13, 26, 30, 13, 26, 30, 39, about 39 million people in the United States are African American. If we fixed those high statistics, then it'd be closer to 80 million African Americans.
Well, here's hoping we can figure.
I mean, go on, that'd be fantastic, right?
Right?
We just went on a total rabbit hole.
That would be a wonderful thing. I'm not.
It'd be wonderful.
Black people are fantastic. I mean, I haven't met many, but of the few, nice. And frankly, I think they look cool. That's racist at all. I think they look badass.
This is funny. I spent most of my life with Black people.
Oh, they
yeah. So it's like, yeah. It's just so funny that there's this forced segregation that both sides do. Well, I shouldn't say both sides, because there's more than two sides in this world, and we got to stop getting out of that two-sided coin thing. But so many people, like the bigots, do it, and then the other bigots do it. You know, it's just they create these labels that are so crazy. The labels are insane. I should say a lack of labels are insane. When you try to make these homogenized group, so stupid. I mean, heterogeneous groups. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple more of these words before we disappear here. I know that's probably getting close to the time we should close down, but systematic or institutional oppression.
Looking at that one. That one drives me fucking crazy, because they say systematic as if that shit fucking means anything. Because show me any laws on the books that direct fucking are different for It's like I got called a fucking misogynist something like 2 weeks ago. Person was just like, I can't be fucking friends with you. You fucking hate women, yada, 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 yada. Not even because they said that I don't think the government should supply birth control at all. I don't think that is the government's responsibility. I go through a healthcare program, insurance or something like that, but condoms are cheap, man. Condoms are cheap. I know that fucking without them is better. I know that, but they're cheap. And they're readily available, and if you're not willing to use them, why should anybody else have to fucking pay for your fucking genitals? Right? And they called me saying that I am part of this group that or I'm of the opinion that tries to marginalize women, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, fuck I am. I actually think women can be accountable for their actions, and
yeah, they're just trying to shift responsibility. It's how do we stop people from thinking that they are responsible for their actions, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's I mean.
Thank you, Shaniqua. I needed the encouragement.
But yeah, no. So on this topic, I was having a really great conversation with somebody who claims feminism, and she was hilarious. I mean, I'm a strong feminist. I'm a strong feminist, and then we're like breaking down certain things, and she's like, yeah, well, I disagree with that, and I disagree with that, but I'm a strong feminist, and it's just like, well, you might be a feminist as in second wave or maybe first wave, but you don't really believe in this third wave stuff, do you? And then she's like, no, those are just the extreme. You can't label all feminists this way. Those are just the extreme. And then she can't help but parrot those same, like that same rhetoric that the third wave feminist is saying. But then when we break it down, she can't defend it.
Okay, so I got a perfect story. So I went to I went to music school, as everybody I'm sure knows. The school that I went to is Grant McEwen. Highly recommend it. It's one of the top programs in Canada for jazz. But anyways, there's a chick who teaches there now. But she was teaching at the time of the story too. And so I'm online and I see her posting about how she is she knows what it's like to be an oppressed woman, and she's programmed. It's what to say and yada 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 yada. But the irony of and how she's oppressed and yada yada yada. Well, the irony of the whole situation is she is a teacher at one of the top programs in Canada. Fucking her grandpa was his name. The street in front of the Premier Jazz Club in Edmonton was named after him, right? And she's been family friends with the dean of that, dean of the music program, all her life.
Right.
Like, you could not ask for more opportunity to be readily available to achieve success in this industry. Like, you just couldn't. And she's sitting here talking about how she's oppressed and she's been programmed into what to say. I'm like, you know what? You absolutely have. But you just don't realize that you're programmed to say the shit that you're saying right now. Because I'm not even saying you can't fucking say it. Right? And another time I got called a misogynist. Apparently it's...
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. So even with this conversation with this friend of mine, they either they can't handle it. So remember those three things we talked about early on. Either they can't cognitively handle it, or they're just ignorant, or they're actually insidious. So again, I don't think that most people are insidious, right? No. I just don't think they are. So when that happens is they put everything in one ball and call it this sexism and this, misogyny and all this type of stuff. So I tried my hardest to break it down, even though she started going that route, but she realized really quickly that she couldn't. She couldn't, because it disproved her either it disproved her argument, or she couldn't handle it cognitively. But I went to the root of this. Are you talking about biological differences, privilege? Are you talking about institutional biases? Are you talking about social norms and biases? Are you talking about culture? What are you actually saying is the problem? And then, all she could say is, oh, all of it. I'm all, okay, well, if it's all of it, let's start with some stuff maybe we might agree on, because she's a science person. So I said, biologically, and she made my day when she omitted to, or at least didn't parrot the talking points. I said, biologically, are men and women different? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, we have common ground. I said, okay, there are differences. Most men are bigger than their female counterparts, correct? Yes. They're physically stronger. Yes. So you as a male, she says to me, she says, Ben, you as a male have privilege because you can go take a walk at night and you're not afraid you're going to get raped. And I said, well, statistically, that is a bad fear to have, right? Statistically, I could be raped just as easily as anybody else. But more so, I could be violated, physically violated, because men will be attacked violently more often than women will be. So it would be biology is sexist, bitch. That's funny, Lisa. So do I have? But I conceded. I said men are typically stronger than women. So yes, I have more confidence, even though it may be stupid confidence. I do in general have more confidence than my female counterparts. Moreover, they brought this up first. It is more likely that I will be fearful for I'll feel more threatened by lewd or cat calls. Wait, did I say that right? I have more privilege because I'll be less threatened by cat calls and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I conceded. I say yes. Biologically, men in our society may have some privilege, and I talked to her about my experiences in a gay bar because when I was in college, I did some dance, and a couple of my friends, including the choreographer, was flaming homosexuals, and they're like, "Hey, the whole troop should come out to these gay bars," and so we'd go and hang out, and it was a great time for almost everybody, and I had a good time. I'm not gonna lie, I had a good time in general, but it was a little bit awkward. It was awkward for some of the patrons of the bar, and it was a little bit awkward for me because guys, and I know I'm 100% positive this happens for women in bars, but guys are hunters, man. And they will look you up and down and check you out like uncomfortably.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, when we're out on the town or whatever it is, or just biologically and how we're kind of hardwired, I do agree, it is harder for women on the day-to-day to avoid sexualized encounters.
Yeah.
So we found common ground there. I said, okay, we're good there. And then she tried to throw in, and then the wage gap. And I'm like, oh my God, I almost threw up everywhere. And we kind of had to start talking about the wage gap and breaking that down. But obviously, wage gap issues leads directly. I said that even at work, it's all the time. I know, Elisa.
She's seen.
But wage gap issues gets into institutionalized, or it gets into the difference between historically, like people might have they can always claim historically this nation had some serious racial issues, obviously, right? Historically, women had some very institutionally problems, right?
Yeah.
So again, more common ground. There was a history of problems in institutions. Contemporarily, not the case anymore.
Yeah.
In fact, I would contend that it's very much the opposite in contemporary institutions, where there's actual legislation that hurts the male population.
Yeah, I would argue that.
But your point is 100% right. So we didn't find really common ground there, even though she couldn't give me one possible scenario that it's institutional. What she because if it was institutional, then that's a amazing lawsuit that it's a killer lawsuit that you're going to win 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into cultural discrimination. So this is extremely tricky too, because it goes back to this idea of privilege, where how do you quantify what privileges you are or are not getting? You know, how do you quantify that? So in culture, what is normal, right? What is the normative perspectives? If you go to a car dealership, yeah, a man might have privilege over a female because the man is going to be assumed to know more about cars because traditionally men have been more interested in cars and what a car has in it, I guess.
Yeah.
And so the culture kind of reflects that. So the car dealer might try to sell the woman a higher price for a more cosmetically attractive car, as opposed to a guy where, well, guys love cosmetically attractive cars too, but they might talk more about like the engine or something. I don't know. Yeah. But then if you go do something else, I mean, women are the I think it's like 60 to 80% consumers. Like women are the ones buying shit, basically. Guys don't buy nearly the amount of shit women buy. Women buy the shit. Women run the economy. So every marketer is marketing to women because they are the ones who are the buyers. The guys are not necessarily the buyers. So the women get more shit than guys get because the market demands it, because women demand their products. So if I want to make a bunch of money, then if I'm really trying to get my business up and running, then my number one demographic is going to be females, because that's my consumer, right? So females are going to have more products that are catered to them. But then they're gonna argue that there's a pink tax, but the pink tax is just the market value, because without a free market, you don't have a pink tax, but you also don't have a cost of anything. Nothing. No one knows what anything costs because there's no market. That was another problem with communism, right? Yeah. So, Soviet Union, in a communist market, didn't know how much anything cost.
Yeah.
Because what's the value of something that you either have to buy or you don't have to buy?
Yeah.
And if you don't have to buy it, you're not going to buy it at all because you can't afford it. You can only afford the things you have to buy, and the things that you have to buy, there's no market value because there's no one else producing it besides the government run.
Yeah.
It's insane. She's got the bangs, I got the nose. Oh, how was your date yesterday, by the way?
It was lovely.
Oh, well, that's good. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that after the stream. That's fantastic.
I mean, it was with Lisa, but...
Oh, it was with Lisa?
Yeah.
You and Lisa went out?
We're talking.
Oh, Lisa, Bobisa, Banana, Fana, Fofisa. I just went like, seriously, 5th grade right there, but... How was the date, Lisa? Did he buy? Did he pay? Did he pay, Lisa?
No.
What did? Oh, never mind. Pulling punches. Pulling punches. Okay. Yeah, totally lost my train of thought. But I think that's a good angle to go when we are having conversations with opposition party, where you kind of go, okay, you're using these terms that don't mean anything yet. Tell me more about these terms so that we can actually find a place of understanding. The thing about it is all the henchmen of the insidious few don't actually know. They can't get any deeper. Their whole thing is, I'm trying to be altruistic. I try to care about all people, and I'm told these words and how I can better help the world by regurgitating this nonsense. Mm-hmm. So they don't really know. So so the most new word that I heard was the word minoritized. So it used to be there's the minority and there's the majority. The majority is the oppressors. The minority is the have-nots, and they are being oppressed.
Yeah.
Well, the word minority is now a microaggression.
Is it?
Yes, and also it was not making logical sense anymore. Well, because if you're a minority, then you are. If I say, "Hey, that guy's a minority," that means I'm saying, "Hey, that guy is the oppressed. That guy is the less than." So, in order to rectify that situation, we're saying that you can't use the term minority anymore because that is pointing out a lower status. Because it's only pointing out a lower status because the left constructed it to be a lower status in order to get what do you call it, points, oppression points or whatever. Yeah. So I mean, it's such a clusterfuck. It's so cyclical. It's so gross. But anyway, So minority is now a microaggression. So we use the term minoritized. Not only was it a microaggression, it was also incorrect. So women were saying, well, we're the minority class. Well, we're the minority class. Well, we're the minority class. Well, in the United States, they are the largest voting bloc, and they're the majority. I'm pretty sure that's true for the rest of the world, too. It's easier to have a woman than to have a male in a lot of ways because I think how the chromosome works. But even if it's not the case, the fact is there's more women in the United States than there is men. So they're not the minority. They're just not. They're the majority. So then the question is, well, why is the majority not voting for a woman? Well, probably because they're brainwashed and they're controlled by their husbands. No, that's not true. Hillary Clinton. It's probably because they don't think that that candidate has the qualifications or the worldview that they share and they want.
God,
simple as that.
They
Right.
based off of like a rational thought.
Yeah. So so we're going to assume that they're actually rational human beings. Women are actually rational human beings. I know it's a far-fetched idea, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that all women are just like men in their ability to be rational. Ability to be rational. I'm not saying they are all rational. Just they have the ability to be rational.
Right?
So
I thought. Apparently, that is a hugely offensive thing to say.
So yeah, right. So they contorted the word minority to minoritized. And what is the implication of minoritized? It is the power, the oppressors, creating a other and pointing the finger at them and saying, you are not as good as us. We have supremacy over you. So it's a way that even if they are the mass majority based on intersectionality, I mean, that's a whole another problem. But even if they are the mass majority, they are the minoritized group because they are being minoritized because they are being oppressed. So what do you do if you're the oppressed? You have to fight against the man. You have to fight against the oppressor. So the bad oppressor is the bad guy, and we have to fight against them, even if we have all the power, even if we have the majority of human beings in our quote-unquote group. By using the language minoritized, it keeps us in the oppressed group. It keeps us in the limited power group. It keeps us in the victim status. So as long as we can keep our victim status, it doesn't matter how powerful or how many of us there are, we're still victims. So we use the term minoritized. Oh, the evil bad guys are minoritizing us, which gets us to intersectionality. Holy crap, this word is disgusting. Intersectionality. Oh, what we wanted it to mean, the flowery part of intersectionality is it's a bunch of people who have been oppressed getting together and creating a strong, united front.
Well, I mean, even more than that, though, it's their Achilles heel, man. Like they're sitting. Intersectionality is basically a long road to figure out that the individual is the smallest minority.
Right. Or that's the hope, right? I think we already have this conversation. That's the hope. The hope is that we get to the point where we get to the individual, right? That's the optimistic end of that. What's the pessimistic? I think we already had this conversation. What's the pessimistic end to that? The pessimistic end to that is all the minoritized groups get together and create a supermajority, and it only leaves out the few people that they have demonized. Well, who will never, ever be part of the intersectionality? Kyle, who will never be part of the intersectionality group, ever?
White males.
White, heterosexual males.
Yeah.
So the white heterosexual males are actually a very, very small percentage of the globe. Very, very small percentage of the globe.
Yeah.
And they're not the majority in the United States either. So if we keep on calling them vermin, I mean Jews, I mean white males, and all white males are oppressors, and all white males are dehumanized, and all white males are other, and all white males are vermin, or not vermin, but toxic. All white males are toxic, and if we keep on, if that's our our constant repetitive call. We are all going to group together because of intersectionality. We are all together. We are all one. We all love each other, except group X, Y, Z, except for the other group. What have we just created?
Genocide.
Well, yeah, of course. But we've created scapegoats of the white males, and we are recreating the very authoritative PC
environment
genocidal environment that happened in World War II.
Yep.
And that's how we get there. So now I think we've gone full circle, right? So that's how we get there. And so all my classmates who said that could never ever happen again in the world are witnessing that same start happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it all starts, in my opinion, it all starts with language. I mean, everything starts with language. The whole world was started with language, because I'm Christian. I believe that. I truly believe that. Language is the greatest holy thing ever. Holy means to be set apart.
It is
language. Language is holy. Language is the end all be all. It's the beginning and it's the end. It's the alpha omega. Mm-hmm. The word is crazy, and if you really think it through, that's a truism. And you don't have to be religious at all. It's just the truth. It's just the truth of the human experience. It has everything to do with language. You can create culture. You can create love and growth and civility and humanity through language, but you can also destroy it and enslave it and manipulate it. And if we're not careful with the language, these euphemisms, this doublespeak, we're gonna
have some trouble.
We're gonna have a lot of trouble, and that's why the people who are propagating this stuff don't want others to speak, because the only thing that can combat the evils of language are the revelations of language. I truly believe that.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
What if you are a transsexual woman who identifies as a disabled man? Well, if you're a midget too, tell you what.
Yeah,
you should be the next president
of oppressed people.
You will be queen dictator, queen male. He, she. I don't know. I can't. I got brain tied. All right, let's close up shop, Kyle. Is there anything else?
No, I'm pretty well done. I'm gonna put this kid to bed and drain the main vein, because that tea went right through me right before I picked up this job. And that is parent life, holding pee.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate the Bears, and it's always great to kind of talk about this stuff.
Thank you for bringing this out. We'll have to do this again soon. I always appreciate the topics you bring towards me. I'm gonna change the title of this to include your name.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, hopefully we can start getting other people in the picture, because I'd love to hear.
I would love to get you and Shaniqua in here.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I'd be 100% into it.
She's got some pretty great insights.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear him, when I've heard him in the past, and I read his comments and stuff on Owen's stream, I'm always very impressed.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah. So bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Tune in.